Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and today is an incredibly serious story. Today is a story out of the District of Columbia where a U.S. attorney has decided to forego all logic and all reason to drop the charges down to the lowest possible level for a murderer who murdered a sick person who was trying to seek care at an emergency room. No, I'm not joking about this. No, this is not hyperbole in any way, shape, or form. This is one of the craziest moves I've seen from a prosecutor in my entire life. Not since doing this channel, since I've been following anything related to criminal justice for the 30 plus years I've been on this planet. Now, we're going to get into this, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
30 minutes ago, police told us that a woman has died after a crash that happened right outside of the D.C. Superior Court building.
And police say this stemmed from a carjacking about 15 minutes before at Washington Hospital Center.
So this is actually the breaking news segment from 30 minutes after the car crash that aired on the local D.C. affiliate of the local news, where they break down the facts of the case. And while early reporting can be quite sketchy, I need you guys to understand that the basic facts of this case have not changed at all whatsoever in the days that follow this. And what happened in this case is absolutely tragic, ridiculous, and you should be charging to the fullest extent of the law the perpetrator in this instance. So let me give you the quick breakdown so you can understand what makes this so egregious. So you have a woman who is elderly. She has MS and she required emergency room care due to the fact that she was fainting. A relative of hers, I believe it was her daughter, drove to the emergency room, parked in the emergency room area in order to run inside and grab a wheelchair in order to get her mother inside, and then she intended to move the car to whatever parking space, but obviously her mother was in desperate need of care and she needed the wheelchair due to her MS. In the time that this woman went inside to get the wheelchair, our suspect for the day, according to the police, carjacked this vehicle with the sick elderly MS person in the vehicle who needed to go to the emergency room, and the carjacker knew that because she was in the emergency room, and for about 19 minutes she drove around with this patient in the car until she ultimately crashed it into the U.S. Attorney's Office or into the D.C. Superior Court, which again, the crime arrived right on the front lawn of the prosecutors, of the judicial system. Now, the suspect in this case is called Kayla Kenesha Brown. She is 22 years old, and it appears from the photos that are circulating online that she was injured in this crash. So it seems like they caught the correct person, even though she fled the scene, because she is on this little stretcher thing in some of the photos that we saw.
The police presence here at 6th and D, which is sort of, right across from the D.C. Superior Court, it's really drawn down tremendously, but the forensics team is still here. So what you're getting an idea of right here is these are two forensics vans that have blocked us off because right now the forensics team is going inside of the white SUV that was the car that a female suspect, police say someone jumped in, the female suspect jumped in and drove off, that still had a passenger inside.
Now, of course, because of the nature of this crime, she was charged initially with carjacking. She was also charged with kidnapping because, again, the MS patient was in the vehicle, and because this crime involved a death or resulted in a death, she was charged with felony murder. Now, all of these charges make sense no matter how you slice this particular case, and I will explain why in a little bit. But I need you guys to understand that she is no longer facing those charges at this moment in time, despite the fact that none of the crucial facts in this case have changed in any way, shape, or form. Now, the victim in this case, who was in the passenger seat, was 55-year-old Leslie Marie Gaines. This was the woman who was suffering from MS, who needed emergency room care, who our suspect in this particular instance didn't give a damn about. She wanted the car more than she cared about why this car was actually idling in an emergency room of all places. So that is the woman who died from this particular crime. However, despite the fact that this crime is incredibly heinous, despite the fact that this crime is absolutely disgusting, what we see is that the suspect is being treated with kid gloves. Of course, we have a mental health evaluation ordered for the 22-year-old criminal in this particular action. But more importantly, more crucially, the kidnapping and the felony murder charges have been dropped by the state's attorney. He's not interested in prosecuting it, and the reason why, which I'm going to give you from a different local news segment, makes no sense. I'm going to let them explain it so you can hear it, and then I'm going to shred that explanation and make it abundantly clear that this is nonsense in every possible way.
A new twist in the case of a woman accused of stealing a car and then crashing and killing a passenger inside. In court this afternoon, we learned the woman is no longer facing charges of felony murder and kidnapping.
So again, I need to make this clear that despite the way that this local NBC affiliate starts off this segment, there is no new twist in this case. There is no updated information. None of the crucial facts have changed at all in any way, shape, or form. This is just the district attorney, the state's attorney for the District of Columbia, refusing to do his damn job. The only twist and turn in this is the fact that this guy used his prosecutorial discretion in order to aid and abet the murderer who didn't give a damn about somebody who needed emergency room care. So let's be clear about that. There's nothing that changed in this case, and what they cite as the explanation should not matter. It has nothing to do with anything.
The U.S. Attorney's Office has dropped those two charges, in part because the medical examiner has not ruled on the cause and manner of death of Leslie Gaines. She was the passenger in the car when police say it was carjacked outside the emergency room of the Washington Hospital Center's MedStar unit. We also learned today that that car was missing for 19 minutes after Kayla Brown allegedly stole it outside the emergency room, and then wherever it went. The detective in this case said there's no video and they have no information to learn where that car was for those 19 minutes.
So right there, the local news presents the case for the district attorney to reduce the charges. He says, listen, the medical examiner has actually not ruled on cause of death, and the fact of the matter is this was a sick person going to the emergency room, and it is possible, I guess, theoretically, that she could have died just coincidentally in the 19 minutes between when the car was stolen and when the car was crashed into the district attorney's office that again decided that he wasn't going to prosecute this case that landed on his front lawn. But here's the thing, and I need to make this abundantly clear for everybody out there in the audience, for your friends, for your neighbors, that doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter a little bit, and let me explain why. Felony murder is not murder. What felony murder is that if somebody dies during the commission of a felony, you know what is a felony? Kidnapping and carjacking. Maybe in DC, carjacking is not a felony anymore, but kidnapping for damn sure is a felony. And if this woman was in need of emergency room care, which by the way, she was, that's why they showed up to the emergency room, and this car was stolen and there was no crash at all whatsoever, but she removed it from the location, and in that time, the woman died from whatever condition that she was going to the emergency room for, that on its own is sufficient for a felony murder charge. So the idea that we have to wait on the medical examiner for cause of death in this case is absurd. It makes no sense. The mere act of stealing the car and that resulting in this woman's death, and by the way, this isn't even one of the leaps that I've seen or the dramatic leaps that I've seen in terms of felony murder, is enough for a felony murder charge. The only way that you could make this argument that it's not a felony murder charge is if you know for sure, and you can prove for sure, that this woman died of her medical conditions in the time between when her daughter went into the hospital to grab the wheelchair and this woman stole the car. It would quite literally have to be in that small, slim, narrow bit of time between when this woman walked through the emergency room doors, grabbed the wheelchair, brought it back out, and noticed that this woman was taking off in her car. So what I'm saying about that is that is not likely at all whatsoever. That is not really a thing, and even if that were the case, if that's what the state's attorney was actually making an argument for, we should expect a desecration of a corpse charge, but that's not there. Instead, he dropped it and he's only charging her with the lowest level unarmed carjacking in this particular circumstance, quite literally allowing this woman to get away with murder. Again, there is no case at all, no way, unless you're going to make the argument that she died in maybe the minute between when she went to grab the wheelchair and when she was coming out and noticed the car was stolen, maybe a minute and a half, and not any time afterwards when the car was actually taken from her. That's the only way you could make the case that this is not felony murder. In every other circumstance, it's felony murder. She died in the crash, felony murder. If she died before the crash while the car was stolen, felony murder. That's why she was in the emergency room. If you pull a gun on somebody during the course of a bank robbery, and by the way, even if nobody shoots that person and they have a heart attack, that's an unrelated medical condition, guess what? Everybody's still going down for felony murder. That is how felony murder charges work. So the idea that this woman was no longer kidnapped, according to the U.S. State's attorney, the idea that this is no longer a felony murder and it's just an innocent Angel Aladdin going for a joyride, an unarmed carjacking, is insane. A 55-year-old woman was abducted in front of the emergency room. She had an emergency medical condition, and the U.S. attorney, despite the fact that this damn car smacked right into the building where his office is located, has decided, you know what? No big deal. Innocent Angel Aladdin. Oh my God, Kayla Kanisha Brown, such a beautiful, stunning, and brave woman. I really appreciate how she fled the scene of the crime because she doesn't give a damn about anyone but herself, but her own enjoyment. So I'm going to sprinkle all this nonsense about how we don't have cause of death and how we don't have surveillance cameras as if that is adequate in order to deny the charge of felony murder. This is egregious. This is horrendous. This is more lawlessness than even I would expect from a normal left-wing city.
Until it crashed into the U.S. Attorney's office right over here, just a few steps from where I'm standing. We also learned from D.C. Fire and EMS, a report that was introduced in evidence, that the paramedics found no injuries to Miss Gaines.
The reality of this case is that there is zero reason to wait on the medical examiner's report to reduce the charges. There is no reason to set this woman up for a slap on the wrist only unless the car accident is what ultimately ended up killing the victim in this particular circumstance. Because any way you slice it, this is a felony murder. Any way you engage with this problem, guess what? It's a felony murder. And for those of you who are saying, well, maybe she didn't have the premeditation to commit the kidnapping, nonsense as well. She got in the car. This woman was in the passenger seat of the vehicle, not in the back seat, in the passenger seat. She would have had to have seen this woman. She knew that she was at an emergency room. She would have likely had to have understood that this woman wasn't there for no reason. This woman wasn't random medical staff. She had MS. She had a serious issues with MS. So it is very likely she would have been symptomatic. She would have been asking for help. And guess what? She did not give a damn. She never valued this woman's life. She didn't care if she lived or died. She didn't care if she was depriving her from serious medical attention. And but for the fact that the state attorney in this particular case decided to go out of his way to bend over backwards in order to aid and abet this criminal, nobody would be questioning this case. I wouldn't be covering this case.
That the paramedics found no injuries to Miss Gaines, and it's unclear if she died from trauma or other medical issues.
And I don't give a damn, to be clear, and you shouldn't give a damn either, if they decide to revise the charges later on, based on the idea that she died in the crash, because that is not the important question right here. What we have is a clear and obvious kidnapping, and unless you have 100% evidence, and again, you're the prosecutor, you should be pushing for this. Maybe the defense can argue cause of death at the trial, but you should be pushing for this, that this woman died in the brief period of time it takes to get a wheelchair from an emergency room. There is no way that this drop charges make sense. There is no way that this is not a kidnapping, and there is no way that this is not a felony murder. So this woman is going to get a slap on the wrist over this case. She's going to get a free pass, basically, if this goes through, because already we have a district attorney who's not interested in prosecuting this woman for her heinous act. He can't even use the larger charge, the felony murder or the kidnapping, both very serious charges, to get a plea deal against this woman because he's already looking to let her go. Again, she smacked right into his office. This 55-year-old woman was dead there, and he thought, you know what? You know who the real victim is? Not the woman who is in desperate need of emergency care, not the woman whose daughter was trying to save her already from her medical condition, who is going to get a wheelchair, but that innocent angel who fled the scene of the crime, that looks like she might be wearing Yeezys, and decided that she would steal a car, boost a vehicle, a Mazda, from an emergency room little roundabout thing. It's absolutely heinous and horrible, and yeah, we need to come out against it. And honestly, I don't know what to do in a situation like this, because for a U.S. attorney to make this move, he has to be so devoted devoted to the woke ideology, so devoted to not prosecuting anyone for anything, that he genuinely must think that the MS person was actually an inconvenience to an innocent angel, and thus deserved her death for being in that vehicle. Anyway, I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you believe I'm overreacting to this, or do you understand through my explanation of how felony murder works that it is not relevant whether or not she was killed in the crash or if she died from being denied medical care by the person who stole the car that she was in? As usual, if you like this video, then show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about this absolutely asinine decision in the District of Columbia. Till next time.